Yes, members, good morning and welcome to this formal meeting of the Environment and Economy Scrutiny Committee. My name is Councillor Ray Wootton and I'm the chairman of this committee. Councillor Martin Greggs, vice chairman of this committee, is also in attendance. Before we proceed further with today's meeting, I would like to mention the devastating news of the death of Conservative MP Sir David Amess, who lost his life after being attacked and stabbed shortly after midday on Friday at his constituency at Belfair's Methodist Church, Leigh-on-Sea. I'd like to ask attendees today to join me in a moment of memory of Sir Amess for a minute. Please stand. Thank you. Please be seated. Thank you. Now we can proceed. Can I remind you that the audio-visual feed of this public meeting is being recorded and will be accessible via the County Council's website following today's meeting. I'd like to begin with the health and safety announcement. There is no fire drill planned this morning. In the event of a fire alarm sounding, we will need to leave the council chamber through the rear doors and leave the building through the reception into the front car park. We need to wait in the car park until further instructions. Can I remind everyone that to make sure their laptops, mobiles and iPads are set to silent. If you wish to ask a question during the course of the meeting, can you please raise your hand? Can I also remind members of the committee to switch off their microphones when invited to speak? To speak close to, switch on their microphones when invited to speak. Please speak close to the microphone and to switch the microphone off after making their contributions. Excuse me, these glasses are not exactly working for me at the moment. I'd like to thank the Democratic Services and Scrutiny representatives of this committee for their contribution in organising and supporting the delivery of this meeting. Finally, I'd like to take this opportunity to welcome Councillor Hilton Spratt. Welcome, Councillor, who has taken up full-time membership of this committee. We will now move to the formal agenda. Item 1, apologies, absence, replacements members. Trina.
Thank you, Chairman. We received apologies from Councillor Kelly and we have Councillor Rob Parker here as replacement member for this meeting only. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Dean. Councillor Parker, welcome to this meeting. And could you please pass on our best wishes to Councillor Kelly? Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Item 2, declarations of councillors' interests. Do members wish to declare any interest? No. Item 3, minutes of the previous meeting of the Environment and Economic Scrutiny Committee held on the 13th of July. This item is to be approved and sign the minutes of the last meeting as a correct record. Do I have a proposer and seconder? Thank you.
I move, Chair.
Are all members happy to take them as read? Thank you. And seconder? All those in favour, please raise their hand. Any absentees? Any against? I will truly sign those as a true record of the meeting on the 13th of July. Thank you. Agenda item 4, announcements from myself, executive councillors and lead officers. From myself, there is a long agenda this morning with one pre-decision item. I would therefore like to ask officers to only summarise the key points of their reports and what is required by the committee in regard to members of this committee to stress the importance of concise questions and contributions. I also like to note the attendance of Councillor Richard Cleaver today relevant to item 5 on the agenda, and also to Councillor Noy Sia, who's also come to speak on behalf of her representatives. Executive Council's announcements. Are there any announcements from Councillor Colin Davey, Executive Councillor for Economic Development, Environment and Planning? Councillor Davey.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Firstly, I was delighted to see you and other members from this committee at the Climate Summit last week at the Lincolnshire Showground. I was pleased to open the event and to provide insight into the work that we are doing here to drive green growth across Greater Lincolnshire, and to share the Green Master Plan, which now underpins so much of this council's work. We heard from a wide range of speakers, and many delegates have spoken about how inspirational the event was. It was a great platform for climate leadership across Lincolnshire, and I think it's worth me restating our own position that we will, under our careful leadership, meet 68% reductions in our carbon footprint by 2025, which will be 5 years ahead of the government's own target. And I think that's a credit to the work that all members have undertaken in this chamber over the last decade or so in supporting this agenda. This leadership is translating into across all executive portfolios now. For example, into highways and transport. You'll be able to see this with the launch of the consultation on the county's local transport plan, which will begin this week. Green transport and the environment will be central themes, along with supporting our sectors as they continue to grow and recover. It was clear listening to the presenters and delegates at the Climate Summit that Lincolnshire business is keen to maximise green growth opportunities, and we will continue to help them with that task. We have just appointed the Considerate Group to produce a green tourism toolkit for us. The Considerate Group have much experience in tourism, delivering hospitality-specific, sustainability-focused toolkits to improve action for business. They will support our businesses to address tourism's contribution to climate change, maximising cost savings and meeting the demands of their customers, as more visitors now want to know what their holiday stay is going to do to meet the challenges of climate change. Team Lincolnshire continues to promote the agenda part of the work they do with our business members. Councillor Dyer welcomed 70 delegates to a recent event at Hemswell Cliff, a joint event for Team Lincolnshire and the Lincolnshire Chamber of Commerce. Councillor Dyer was able to share the wide range of support that we have provided throughout the pandemic and highlight the opportunities ahead as we hopefully see COVID in the rearview mirror. Team Lincolnshire will launch their new website on the 26th of October 2021. This new website will provide our members with more support, give their businesses a better platform to showcase themselves. The website will be a driver for investment, showcasing our sector propositions to both new investors to the region, as well as businesses already located here. And I think it's worth reminding the committee that we're currently handling over 55 international investment inquiries into the Greater Lincolnshire area, a lot around the agri-food sector, but also some around the low carbon agenda. So, you know, Lincolnshire is a hotspot for investment, and it's really pleasing to say a lot of that's international investment. At the last meeting of this Scrutiny Committee, I spoke about the difficulties that many sectors are facing, in particular around supply chain and recruitment. These challenges remain, with vacancies across sectors, but noticeably high number of vacancies persisting in transport, logistics and warehousing. I note you're going to be looking at the food and farming sector today. And this is a sector that is experiencing these pressures throughout, from a lack of HGV drivers to take beet to the sugar beet factory, to skilled workers processing carcasses in abattoirs. Last week, the County Council and the LEP responded to a call for evidence from the Environment, Food and Rural Affairs Committee on these issues. Looking forward to next week, the Comprehensive Spending Review. The Chancellor will doubtless be making some challenging fiscal decisions as we speak. However, we hope to hear positive announcements on the levelling up agenda from the bids that we submitted in June to the Community Renewal Fund, which have been delayed and delayed again, and the Levelling Up Fund, as well as information on UK Shared Prosperity Fund. And I'm going to leave you with a couple of dates now for your diary, with a food and farming theme in light of the agenda today. This Wednesday, the 20th of October, Team Lincolnshire are holding the second South Lincolnshire FES webinar. The event will showcase the progress to date and the wider opportunities in relation to the UK Food Valley. The UK Food Valley will be launched at the LEP conference at the showground on the 2nd of November. And if members wish to attend, they need to register for that conference. It is free. I think you'll learn a lot about what the economic geography is looking like and the opportunities. And on 4th of November, Team Lincolnshire will be at the Fresh Produce Consortium event at the Lincolnshire Showground again to showcase to investors the South Lincolnshire Fairs and the UK Food Valley. So, Chairman, there's a lot of work going on, as you can see, and I would close by saying I'm very optimistic for the future, despite the challenges we face. I think Lincolnshire is well placed, but we do need to be mindful that there are issues that could derail a lot of what is being planned in the future if we don't get to grips with them at a national level and a local level. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Davey. I'd just like to comment on the climate conference. It was good to see Councillor Cleaver there. I know Linda, my wife, and I found it very interesting. I think also Councillor Baxter, you were in attendance. Unfortunately, due to being on the Health Scrutiny Committee, we couldn't attend until the afternoon. But what surprised me and struck me was the large number of people that were really interested in that particular topic, and also the displays that they had. And I look forward to perhaps another opportunity to visit in future. Thank you. Senior officers, are there any officers' announcements from the local officers? No. We'll move on then to the main item of the agenda, Supplementary Waste Collection Service and Petition. This is a pre-decision item on the discontinuation of the supplementary waste collection services at Stanford and Maplethorpe. The report can be found on pages 17 to 30 of the agenda. Before we start this item, I would like to set out how this item will be handled, as we have a number of speakers. The running order for them will be as follows. Mike Reid, Head of Waste Services, will introduce the Supplementary Waste Collections Report and provide members with an outline of the services at Stanford and Maplethorpe. I will then invite Ms. Rose Batty to introduce the Restore the Saturday Waste Recycling Collections in Stanford, Lincolnshire petition, and to address this committee for a maximum of 5 minutes. I will then invite Ms. Batty to present the petition to me as chairman on behalf of the committee. This will be followed by an opportunity for members of this committee to ask any clarifying questions. Following this item, I will then invite Councillor Richard Cleaver to speak for a maximum of 3 minutes, and followed by him will be Councillor Mcnaughty Sear, who will then have the opportunity to also ask questions. Where is Councillor Sear? Oh, there she is over there. Good, good. There will then be an opportunity for members of the committee to ask questions, and then we will then go into the consideration. So first of all, could I welcome Ms. Rose Batley and ask her to speak for no more than 5 minutes.
Thank you very much for having me here today. Good morning. My name is Rose Batty. I'm 18 years old and soon to go off to university. I currently live in Stamford with my family. Like many other Stamford residents, the 1,600 who have also signed the petition, I was disappointed when the Stamford Waste Collection Service was suspended during the COVID pandemic and was shocked to find out that it wasn't going to be continued. I was pleased to see that both Councillor Callum Cook, also the leader of SKDC, and Councillor Richard Cleaver signed the petition, supporting Stamford residents who are actively trying to do the right thing environmentally. For example, the Stamford Town Council has a climate action working group chaired by Amanda Wheeler. Many shops in Stamford try to operate in an environmentally ethical way. For example, we have our own green quarter in the town. Stamford residents volunteer with Stamford litter pickers to keep the town litter free, and many schools in Stamford teach children about good environmental behaviour. I should know, as I was an eco ambassador at my primary school for many years. So having a household waste collection service in the town which is accessible to everyone does play a vital role. The Lincolnshire Waste Partnership is, as stated in the report, struggling to meet the UK recycling target. They're in fact 10% below. This concerns me deeply. What concerns me more is that the Lincolnshire Waste Partnership does not understand why this is. They stated in the report, there are many factors contributing to this underachievement, many of which are unclear. Therefore, how can we blame the supplementary service for the council's own failure to reach their 50% recycling target? Many people transport their waste to Bourne making people transport their waste to Bourne will have a negative environmental impact because if everyone in Stamford were to make this 35-kilometre round trip, then 252 tonnes of carbon dioxide would be emitted. Not everyone has access to transport their waste to the recycling centre. Therefore, just because you are in a 12-mile radius does not make this accessible. And although I appreciate it may not yet be proven, this may increase the likelihood of fly tipping. As mentioned earlier, the report does try to frame the service as being detrimental to increasing recycling rates and helping save our environment. I believe this to be completely false. Carbon dioxide emissions are the most devastating cause of climate change, and by closing the service, you're only exacerbating this issue by increasing road transport to Bourne. This in itself would be detrimental to reaching the government's target of net carbon zero by 2050. On this note, I was very confused as to why CO2 emissions were not mentioned once in the report. Having read the report from 2016, when the service was continued, I can see that the emissions from car journeys to Bourne were a central concern and a contributing factor to continuing the services. The report states that recycling rates go down as the supplementary services are in place. However, this does not mean that one causes the other, so this correlation does not equal causation. The root cause is in fact that recycling infrastructure or the drive to recycle is not yet in place. Too much waste goes to landfill or incineration, but this is a separate issue for the county council to tackle themselves. If you really wanted to, you could have both higher recycling rates and the supplementary service in place. The two are not mutually exclusive. In 2016, the waste collection service was continued by the Executive Councillor for Waste and Recycling, based on the rapid exponential population growth of Stamford. 5 years later, the rate of growth is even larger, therefore we must assume that the need is even greater. Also, we have a larger population than Sleaford, which has its own recycling centre. We're the largest town in Lincolnshire without a HWRC, and we are the 7th largest town in Lincolnshire. Therefore, one may question the method of allocation for the current 11 HWRCs in the county. I appreciate, as stated in your report, that Stamford is not the only town with a large population that just falls into the 12-mile radius rule. However, we do undeniably have the most plausible case to ask for these services to be reinstated. The fact that the council sends recyclable materials to landfill or incineration is not the fault of the residents of Stamford, but the fault of the council. This is why you haven't achieved the recycling rates, not because the supplementary services aren't working. The council have simply failed to find the innovation needed to recycle efficiently and tackle the climate crisis. SKDC have declared a climate emergency, yet LCC has not, which does not instill confidence in LCC's commitment to green credentials, something the people of Stamford, LCC taxpayers clearly feel strongly about. To conclude, if you're not willing to spend money now on environmental issues, then when will you be? We are not asking for much, but simply for you to reinstate the services which were once implemented and deemed essential by the county council. As a young person, I hope that you choose to act on this small yet impactful issue. Thank you very much. I invite any questions.
Thank you very much, indeed. What I'm going to do is I'm going to open up to members for questions first and ask you to present me to the petition. Are members of the committee, do any of them have any questions for? No? No? Ms. Batty, could you ask you to come forward and I will take your petition. The petition demands that Lincolnshire County Council, LCC, restores the Saturday recycling materials collection for the Stamford Cattle Market. And following the receipt of that petition, I will be passed to Councillor Daniel Mcnaughty, Executive Officer. We'll improvise. We'll improvise. We'll improvise. So, okay, this is the petition. So, you want to hand it to me? Okay. Okay. Right, I now call on Councillor Richard Cleaver, who has 3 minutes to speak. Councillor Cleaver.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for allowing me to address the committee.
Councillor Cleaver, your mic's not on.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for allowing me to address the committee on, as it considers this issue, which is a concern to the residents of my division in Stamford. The Saturday Waste Collection Service is a popular and well-used service, which is of great convenience to the residents of Stamford. The proposed discontinuation of this service is a revisitation of an attempt to close the service, which was thwarted by the Environment Scrutiny Committee 5 years ago. The proposed closure then was purely about cost saving. However, now, apparently, it is more about recycling, reducing volumes going to landfill, and applying the HWRC policy consistently, as you'll see on page 19 of the paper in the agenda pack. And the only alternative offered to closure is to keep it as it is. So just addressing those 3 points that are in the paper very quickly. The HWRC policy is applied consistently. 95% of residents live within 12 miles of an HWRC. That is the policy, and it is being applied. On the question of reducing the volumes going to landfill and recycling, I think it's disappointing indeed that we as a council cannot come up with an alternative form of collection service which addresses the recycling and landfill issues. Is it a lack of will, or is it a lack of imagination and ambition? Might it not be the case that rather than fewer weekly mobile waste collection services, we should have more of them in more towns to actually improve our recycling rates further? I should therefore encourage the committee to reject this report and to ask for the decision to be delayed whilst our waste service researches an alternative which provides a weekly collection service which will enhance recycling and eliminate use of landfill. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Cleaver. I will now invite Councillor Noisir to speak for no more than 3 minutes. Councillor Sear.
Good morning, and I speak on behalf of Maplethorpe. I have a lot of concern for my resident. I don't know how much it costs. I you look at the sick or whatever, but I think if the council can be think about it and the committee, maybe instead of 1 fortnight, maybe once a month, but it be cheap in the long run because people in that area were doing 5 tipping and already have that. It will going to cost council more to go out and clear the mess. So please reconsider it. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Councillor. Just to let members know, I have received emails from Mr. Anthony Margett and Mrs. Anne Nash, Councillor Mrs. Amanda Wheeler, Councillor Sean Ford of Stamford Town Council, and Stephen Palmer, former County Councillor for Alford and Sutton, and also communications from the Mayor of Stamford, and this morning from Councillor Callum Cook, leader of South Kesteven District Council. I must give you my apologies, member, because I've took somebody out of order. So I'm now going to call on Mike Reid to present his work. Mike.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The supplementary waste service collections were established many decades ago and existed in a lot of the large towns and around the county. There were over 25, I believe, 20 years ago, and these were locations where the public could deposit large, bulky items of residual waste. Back then, we didn't have recycling. All material went to landfill. So some of these sites were at landfill locations, and other were established in car parks and and on public highway. And this was simply a method for the public to dispose of this extra bulky material. Now, as the environment has kind of evolved and we have more of a focus on recycling, these supplementary services have been seen to be inefficient in how we actually handle and process waste. They don't enable many materials to be recycled. They are very limited in what we can actually collect and what we can actually process as a result. And it doesn't help with the recycling targets that we want to achieve. They are not fully to blame for the poor recycling targets that we have. A lot of that is down to public behaviour, and a lot of that public behaviour is something that we continually try to influence. But the supplementary service collections were gradually downscaled because they don't meet this requirement. They don't provide these opportunities for recycling. So I won't go through point by point what the report states, because I think most people have probably read these reports and heard from the eloquent representations. I think one thing to bear in mind is that we are the waste disposal authority. We're not the waste collection authority. There are plenty of opportunities for materials to be collected and deposited in all around the county. There are curbside collections on a fortnightly basis, which the district councils are responsible for. There are bulky waste collections, which the district councils are also responsible for. These services have been going on unhindered, fairly unhindered for the last 18 months, many years before that, and COVID has had some impact. But the fact remains that there are streams, there are opportunities for people to recycle at the curbside. However, the issue with curbside collections is that there aren't the containers available to segregate the type of material that we would like. So, for example, if people want to dispose of bulky waste, mattresses, soil, hardcore, rubble, batteries, this is material which can't be collected at the curbside. And that's why household waste recycling centres were established with a policy which clearly presents that opportunity to segregate these materials. And that is something which has provided a recycling rate of around 75% at these household waste recycling centres. That can't be achieved at the curbside. The curbside and household waste sites do have a part to play. We ideally need a combination of both, and that's why we're looking at separate collections for other materials at curbside as well. But to kind of look at the arguments being put forward about saving carbon through fewer residents' mileage trips to our sites, then if you have a natural extension of that, we have more collection services on a weekly or fortnightly basis which are free to the public. That's not the function of the county council. And if the district council want to look at that as an option, then they are perfectly within their gift to do so. We are the disposal authority. We are not the collection authority. I think people need to be very mindful of that. So in summation, I think it's obvious what the arguments are from the reports, but the objectives of the partnership are not being met. We are struggling to meet these, and we're not putting this down to supplementary waste collections. However, it could be a contributing factor if we say that the policy is not fit for purpose and is not, the policy on HWRC provision needs to be adapted, then that is something that we could consider. But to take a retrograde step and start introducing supplementary waste collections at different towns would be a backward step. And it's something which, if we want to be consistent, we would have to have a policy in place for whether or not we do have those kind of services. There is an argument that if we give this kind of service to Mablethorpe and Stamford, other areas have an equally strong case. There's a financial and a economic and an environmental argument to both sides. I accept that, but it's something that we need to look more in the round. And if we want to look at a change to policy, then there are opportunities to do that. But at this point in time, we have a policy in place which has been supplemented, and we're going over and above with these services that have been taking place. And one thing that I would like to highlight is that in the last 18 months, there hasn't been a marked increase in fly tipping in Mablethorpe and Stamford above the national average. This material that people historically would have got rid of at supplementary services might be finding its way into the household waste recycling centres, and it's something which we don't know. We don't have the evidence to show either way. But it's something which we believe that there may be behaviour change, and people are recycling better as a consequence of not using the supplementary waste services, which were purely to collect residual waste, and that's not recycled material. So it goes against the kind of objectives of the Lincolnshire Waste Partnership. So I'll just conclude there, but the recommendation is to discontinue the services. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Steve. Mike. And before I open up to members of the committee to ask questions, you mentioned in your report and just now about no increase in fly tipping, yet I've received information from the Mayor of Stamford that fly tipping has increased, particularly on the road to Peterborough from Stamford. Could you comment on that, please?
Yes, fly tipping has increased everywhere nationally. There is large concentrations around areas of big public highways. So significantly, the A15 and A17 has seen an increase in fly tipping. And one thing that I'd just like to point out to people is that if residents have not been have residents been fly tipping in the last 18 months, it's something of a negative attitude towards residents to say that because you don't have these services, you're going to fly tip and potentially create a legal issue for yourself and break the law, rather than do the proper thing and drive to a household waste site. So fly tipping has increased everywhere, but we don't think it's down to residents. I think it's more down to disreputable traders who are taking advantage of public waste difficulties. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Mike. I'm now going to open up to members of the committee to ask relevant questions. And if you wish to speak, could you please make your intentions known to Councillor Gregg, my Vice Chairman. Councillor Gregg. Councillor Taylor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much for this. Interesting to hear the comments from public speakers today. Clearly some passion there, and particularly when we hear about the work done by litter picking volunteers across the county. Some excellent work there. If I just turn to the page 19 of this report and look at the recommendations, it talks about discontinuing service from October 2021. Well, that sounds as if that's a leap into the unknown. In fact, as we now know by this report, this has been the situation for the past 18 months, and the report explains the situation which has taken place. I would expect that not all residents from Stamford and Mablethorpe would actually realise that this is not recycled and it is sent to a landfill, which we know, as the officer spoke about, was the case many years ago, which we have moved away from. So that is a concern, and hopefully this report has highlighted the fact to local people that this is sent to landfill. And as the officer spoke about, alternatives being in place. So that's my comments on that report. So I will support the recommendations with a question. I know we discussed disposal and collection authorities, and similar to your comment there, Chairman, regarding fly tipping. So my question there is, can we make some more effort to work with our partners and district councils and government departments regarding enforcement on fly tipping and catching those offenders and making our environment a cleaner and safer place? Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Just to come back on, Mike.
Yes, we have recently, the partnership has recently implemented an environmental crime initiative, and it's something that we are working very closely with various stakeholders, including the police, and looking at a stronger punitive action against fly tippers. It is something which is environmentally damaging. It is antisocial, and we are acting on that, and we have a particular set of officers that have this remit to kind of go after these people. So thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Mike. The next speaker I have is Councillor Baxter. Councillor Baxter.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you particularly to Miss Rose Batty for coming all the way from Stamford to express her concerns and those of her community. I've got to say that this please don't take any of the comments personally, officers, but this is something that has been brewing for a long time, and it's mainly to do with the lack of funding for local authorities. And that is mainly the reason why the recycling rate in this county has fallen from over 50% to barely 40%, and shows little sign of getting back up to the 50s in the near short medium term, especially if we take services away, and especially if we take away the opportunities that we have to promote good recycling that are available to us. One service that was provided in the Deepings was the Stowgate Road Recycling Centre, which was privately run by Mr. Prentice, and it was very popular and continued despite the withdrawal of recycling credits by this council some years ago. When you took waste to Mr. Prentice, he would say to you, that's recyclable, okay, I'll put this in the waste skip. And surely this is something that could happen. I mean, it does happen at the household waste recycling centres that people sort it properly. I don't understand why it couldn't happen on a Saturday morning or whenever the collections are in Stamford and Mablethorpe. Furthermore, another reason why recycling has fallen in the county is the withdrawal of recycling credits to the district councils, which I believe has cost SKDC about £1 million a year. You put me right, it might be nearer 600,000, but certainly it's an awful big chunk of the waste and recycling budget. And it's this buck passing between the county and the district saying, we're not the waste disposal authority, we're the waste collection authority, or we're not the waste collection authority, we're the waste disposal. The public do not care whether it's the county, the district, the parish, or the national government that's collecting this waste. They just want to be responsible and be able to get rid of their waste without having to drive a 25-mile round trip to Bourne or anywhere else. Talking of which, the 12-mile radius of the household waste centre, as you probably know, Stamford may be in the catchment as the crow flies, but if you look on Google or if you look on your own speedometer, odometer, it's over 13. So not to split hairs, but it is a long way. It's a long way to Bourne to take your waste, and it's especially long way if you haven't got a car or a van, as many people in Stamford do. Fly tipping. You're right. The report says that there hasn't been any noticeable increases in fly tipping in Mablethorpe or Stamford above the expected normal levels. Well, it depends on your normal. If your normal is the post-pandemic normal, then maybe there are other reasons why it's gone up. But we've certainly heard at SKDC Environment Committee that fly tipping has gone up and up. And it's disingenuous to say we shouldn't blame the public for fly tipping, when in the same speech you've said that it's public behaviour which is to blame for the rates of contamination within the normal curbside recycling centre, which I might add, 30% of what we put in our grey bins. In South Kesteven we have grey bins, other bins are available across the county, but in South Kesteven, 3 out of 10 items, or 3 out of 10 by weight, that is put into the grey bin is contamination. And that's down to the lack of public information and enforcement. And the lack of public information and enforcement is down to the lack of funding, which takes you back. So for a modest amount of funding, we could make life much easier for people in Stamford and Mablethorpe who don't have the capacity to take all this stuff to Bourne Recycling Centre, which is shut for half the week anyway, if I remember rightly. I think Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, it's not open. And just going down my list yeah, so we should be promoting recycling. There's an ideal opportunity to do that in Bourne, in Stamford and Mablethorpe at these weekly waste collections. And we should, oh yeah, the last thing that you said was we shouldn't start introducing, it's a backward step. But for the pandemic, we wouldn't be introducing it. It would be something that had carried on anyway. This isn't a new service. This is a continuation of a service that was taking place before the pandemic and should pick up, like everything else, now that we're back into whatever's normal. So frankly, Chair, I'm not impressed with the excuses that we've been given for not reintroducing this service, and I suggest that we do reintroduce this service. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Baxter. I note your passion on environmental issues. Next speaker is Councillor Spratt. Councillor Spratt.
Thank you, Chairman. I do have some sympathy. I would suspect most councillors of all parties would have some sympathy with what's been put forward by the petitioner, who is incredibly articulate and passionate, and also council colleagues. I think the fact of the matter is that we've had this ad hoc provision, which clearly couldn't go on because it's unsustainable. And we do need a consistent policy, and I do appreciate the points that Councillor Baxter makes, but about finance and such like. But we do have a consistent policy, but the policy has to fit in with the financial constraints of this council, and therefore, whilst I have fingers crossed, I am going to support the recommendation. I'm very concerned about fly tipping, as indeed colleagues have said. Is there any way, particularly in relation to Mablethorpe and Stamford, that if this recommendation does go through and is enacted, is there any way we can particularly monitor Stamford and Mablethorpe between now and next year to see if there is any particular increase in fly tipping as a result of this recommendation going through? Because then we would be able to see genuinely whether there was an increase in fly tipping. You see, we're all saying there's been an increase in fly tipping, but you need evidence. And that's all I've got to say, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Spratt. Mike, would you like to perhaps answer some of the questions Councillor Baxter and Councillor Spratt raised? Thank you.
Sorry. Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Baxter did raise some very good points, and a lot of the points are, I think they are wider discussion points about what we need to do as a service and go above what the supplementary services can achieve. I think we need to work better and closer with the district councils, and we recognise that, and that's something that we're trying to encourage through the partnership. And also we need to have a better understanding of what the residents are doing, and we need to be stronger with our message to the public about what can be recycled and how we can best maximise the kind of opportunities for the public. So it's something that we are very mindful of, and I think it's something that we do take for granted as officers, how much people know. And I think it's something that we do need to be more open and work better with the public and private businesses to encourage the recycling message. In response to Councillor Spratt's comments on fly tipping, we do need to improve our data on fly tipping collection. We are talking to the district councils because at the moment it's not highlighted even the frequency or location of fly tip collections. So as the disposal authority, we just get an annual tonnage. We get essentially what turns up at the gates from the contracts that we have in place. So what we're starting to look at with the district council partners is to have more of an itemised database of what material is collected from what locations, so that we can start to develop that picture, and it gives us a benchmark that we can start to measure a bit more effectively. Because in the past, I think we've always thought that fly tipping was something that was quite rare and it didn't really affect a lot of people. But even just looking at the figures from the last 2 years, it's obvious that it is an issue, and it's something that if we can try and pinpoint where this is happening, it will help us to eradicate what is it's a bad practice, it's a legal practice, but we do need the data from the district councils. It's something that we are looking to get better information in future. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. I know in South Kesteven we have regularly fitted covert cameras in high hotspot areas, so you will not know where they're fitted, but they are, rest assured, they are being fitted. And with regards to recycling bin, our recycling bin out this morning is full up to the brim, full. I couldn't close the lid, so And we regularly get updates from our district council on what we can and what we cannot put in those bins. So I think that's the key to it, knowledge of what we can recycle, or cannot recycle. My next speaker is Councillor Griggs.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Firstly, I'd like to say my cough isn't COVID. I've tested many times, so I do apologise if it's distracting anyone or panicking anybody. Secondly, I'd like to thank Miss Batty. I think she spoke very eloquently, and I think the sign of a good speaker is they immediately get you on their side. And after she spoke, I was going, no, I agree with everything she said. It makes perfect sense. And again, likewise with Councillor Cleaver. Unfortunately, much as I wanted to disagree with Mr. Reid, he raises some good points. We have a duty to be cautious about what we spend the taxpayer of Lincolnshire's money on and make sure that it is within our parameters. And much as I don't want to agree with that, that is what we're here for. And he's quite right. Yeah, we are the collection, the waste disposal authority, not the collection authority. Now, I would say I'm more than happy to look at the policy because I do sympathise. Being from a less affluent family growing up, I'm well aware that the issues relating to transporting waste if you don't have access to transport is a big one, and puts unnecessary strain on people. So I'm more than happy to think that we should relook at the policy and say, is it fit for purpose? However, I do have to agree with Mr. Reid. The other point I've got is, whilst I appreciate it's fine monitoring the waste on the information on fly tipping, that may prove slightly tricky, but during the pandemic, every waste recycling centre was asking for information off residents to find out where they came from. So surely we have the data on whether or not many people were making that commute to dispose of waste or not. And that should hopefully inform whether or not there is need for a facility closer to these population hotspots in the first place. So regrettably, I'm minded to support the recommendation pending on the rest of the debate. But again, I commend Miss Batty for public speaking. It takes a lot to come stand in front of the county council.
Thank you, Councillor Griggs. Do you wish to comment, Mike? Thank you.
Yes, the information we hold regarding the booking system and the last 18 months prior to the 1st of September is not something that we have analysed in terms of demographic or where people are from. It's something that we didn't want to hold the information for that purpose. It was purely to establish that we were dealing with Lincolnshire residents. So I'll talk to colleagues on our legal side and see if we can actually look at that. But it's something that we were very mindful that we didn't want to create any suspicion on residents that their information will be held for any other purpose other than just booking into the household waste recycling centre. So that's simply the reason that we haven't used that information. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Our next speaker is Councillor Rob Parker. Councillor Parker.
Thank you. Like a lot of people who've spoken before, I'd also like to congratulate Rosie on her contribution. I think it was a display of eloquence and passion, backed by a lot of substantially good ideas. So,
Councillor Parker, I should speak into the microphone. I'm having trouble hearing you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for the reminder. The point that I wanted to make isn't about, in a sense, what I'm going to call the detail that we're talking about. It's the headline that screams out to me on page 21, which says that we've got, as a Lincolnshire Waste Partnership, 10 objectives. Big one, to contribute to the UK recycling targets of 50% by 2020 and 55% by 2025. And it goes on to talk about, and this is, I think, really seriously important, the partnership is currently struggling to meet this target, with the overall rate being around 40%. Okay, there are many factors contributing to this underachievement, and then the real buster is many of which are unclear. Now, here are we sitting talking about the detail, should we say, about what should we do in relation to Stamford and Mablethorpe, when at a high level, we've set ourselves a target, we've not reached it, and we don't know why. Now, that seems to me to be a fundamental issue, and almost what we're talking about becomes of second nature. But I do want to ask the question quite simply, portfolio holder and senior officers, why are we able to feel comfortable about writing 2 sentences in a paragraph like that? Now, would we be able to get away with that if it was a finance paper? when we said we've underspent by, I don't know, 2.2 million, but we don't quite know why. They're fundamental questions, and this environment does make us feel as though this is a good thing, we all support it. But when it comes to failure, and we don't know the reason for failure. Now, the failure could be the targets were set too high, but these seem to be UK recycling targets. So I really do want to make that particular point and ask portfolio holder, yourself as chair of scrutiny, this particular scrutiny committee, what do we intend to do about finding out why we're underachieving, and why is it that at this point in time that the reasons for the underachievement are unclear?
Thank you, Councillor Parker. Who would like to answer that? Mike, go ahead, please.
Thank you. Very, very good points. I think the text in the report regarding recycling rates is to paint the bigger picture. So it's not trying to attribute the supplementary services to and say that they're responsible for this lower than expected recycling rate. I think the reason why we are lower than we would like to be is very unclear, simply because it comes down to pure human behaviour. How we throw material away is something that we don't know why we have certain spending patterns. We don't know if it's because certain materials are being packaged in a certain way. There is a real plethora of issues that we need to analyse and see if we can establish why the benchmark is apparently changing. And I think it's something that these levels and these aspirations were set quite a few years ago now, and I think it's something that we could do to look at reviewing them to see if they are still realistic. I think it's something that it's good to have high objectives, but if they're not achievable, then it's something that we might have to look at redressing. And it's something that is for a bigger kind of discussion with the partnership, but these are levels that were set many years ago. And I think the reason why, which we keep coming back to, and Councillor Parker's made some really good points about not understanding this, is that this is a national trend. This is not a local issue. This is nationally. And many experts around the country in the waste sector don't understand why recycling rates, when we have more opportunities for recycling, don't understand why the recycling rates are lower. And it's something that we are in Lincolnshire, we're starting to think about whether it's the end processes that have moved the benchmark on what is classed as contamination. And we are now carrying out more testing of material before it gets disposed of to establish what the contamination levels are, and then we can pinpoint if that certain level of contamination is due to certain areas or certain boroughs, and try and pin down what the type of material is creating this difficulty. So it's something that we are working closer with our recycling disposers, but we're actually putting in place, we now have a performance team who are looking at the contamination levels to enable us to develop this picture a bit further. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. I mean, you're right. Human habits. So we've just been to Newcastle, where there was ample rubbish bins everywhere, but there were more rubbish on the street late at night on Saturday night than in the bins. People just are either lazy or just don't realise that they're contributing towards the waste in the country. And Councillor Parker, could you just come back on those comments you made?
We are a scrutiny committees, loads of scrutiny committees, and I just wonder how what you're saying is being dealt with behind the scenes by officers is part of the scrutiny process. In other words, how do we bring forward to this particular committee details of recycling targets by neighbourhood areas, for example? As you know, this is the first time I've been to a meeting of this particular scrutiny committee, but it would seem as though that this could be, would be pretty good if it was in more of a public debate, in other words, available to councillors with periodic reports about what is being done in order to try to reach our targets of 50%, because if we can't reach 50% for a year ago, the chances of reaching 55% are pretty remote. And it just seems as though the way sometimes to get action is to make it public so that people are looking at it regularly to see whether or not attempts to change and improve a service have been successful. Now, you're saying that things have been looked at and it's difficult to influence human behaviour, probably. But are there any differences across Lincolnshire in recycling rates, subtle differences between one part of Lincolnshire and another? As I said, I'm certainly no expert, but it just seems to me that this is a scrutiny issue that this committee may want to look at in a bit more detail, because nobody can deny that this is a seriously important issue and is of interest to a lot of people. Recycling is something that everybody could and should be able to do successfully, but we don't seem to be doing as well. Okay, as our target. I don't know how well other local authorities are doing. But maybe a look at the ones that seem to be doing better may prove to be of advantage to us in Lincolnshire.
Thank you, Councillor Parker. I'm going to bring Councillor Colin David. I've got 4 more speakers, then I'm going to close the meeting.
I was just interested in Councillor Parker's comments. I think, you know, you're here today to look at a specific position. You've got a paper, it's got recommendations based on a policy position we have as a council, so you have to determine it on that basis. But however, Councillor Parker, as chair of Overview Committee, is raising some points around the partnership, the waste partnership in Lincolnshire, how we work with districts, how districts work with us. And there's always an opportunity for scrutiny of our relationships to make sure they're performing to the best of their ability going forward. So I'm sure it's a matter for Councillor Parker to raise an overview with the chairs of the committees to determine whether there is a need to look at this relationship to improve it, because ultimately we have a green master plan for Lincolnshire. Disposing of waste is incredibly important, getting it right. And at the moment, Chairman, as we all know, districts collect some of the stuff differently. You know, educating people in a very challenging time about what should go in which bin is an issue, quite clearly, and there needs to be some thought about that as well. So is there a piece of work to look at this? Probably there is. So I'll leave Councillor Parker to bring that through the formal process with you, Chairman. But going forward, you know, the relationships have to work well if we are to succeed in delivering on our ambitions and targets. And it's quite clear that there are some challenges going forward in this regard, and we need to get as best as we can be, and that's just simple. So, you know, I think the committee has a role today in looking at the paper, bearing in mind the policy position we have at the moment. Until that position changes, you have to therefore determine on that basis, but there's no reason why through the overview scrutiny process you can't examine whether there are things that can be done to improve. I'm sure Mike and his team will work with the committee on that basis.
Thank you, Councillor. I'm now going to bring in Councillor Danny Mcnaughty.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. The Councillor Parker brings up a very valid point, and I think previous KPI figures that go to the Environment and Economy Committee give an overall percentage of all the district. So that's how we get to the 40%. And I think possibly in future we need to look at the KPI figures and have them down in district categories, because there is a vast difference between the performance of each district. And then at least if the overview committee or the Environment Economy Committee can look at that, see which districts, and then a lot of people are actually members of the district councils, so they can go back, try and find out why certain things are happening, but at least we'll have the data available to us.
Thank you very much. Are you happy with that, Councillor Parker? Thank you very much. So I've got 4 speakers, people who haven't spoke before. If I can bring you in, Councillor Baxter, I will, but I'm going to try and close soon. Councillor Haigh next.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to ask Mike, if possible, my understanding is that Stamford and Mablethorpe sites, recycling sites, are there because the original tips were there. And I'd like to ask if the area available for recycling is restricted compared with other sites across the county, whether the council has considered relocating those two recycling sites in other parts to increase the amount of recycling there, and also how those two sites compare currently with some of the best in the county. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Hayes. Very good question. Mike, are you able to answer?
Sorry, I didn't quite catch the kind of question. Could you just express it again? Apologies. Okay.
Those sites are restricted in the amount of recycling that they can do. Has the council considered relocating those to larger areas in Stamford and Mablethorpe, thus increasing their the amount of waste they can recycle?
Thank you. Apologies for that. The Mablethorpe site is on a public highway. It's on a cul-de-sac. It's very limited in space. The Stamford site, I believe, is in the cattle market in the middle of Stamford. Now, the issue with finding a bigger location is that once you start looking at a more permanent site, that site will need planning permission. It's very easy for a truck, a refuse collection vehicle, to pull up somewhere, accept one type of waste and have the material essentially thrown in the back of that vehicle, and then that vehicle's full and it moves on. When you start considering a larger provision for that, having more permanent bins or wheelie bins which allow segregation, you need more space and more land availability, and then it becomes a more of a legal issue, because you're not dealing with vehicles which, strictly speaking, we shouldn't be doing this on the public highway anyway, but the cattle market, I believe, might be the town council or private land, so it's more acceptable. But once you start collecting more different materials, it's going to be far more under scrutiny from the Environment Agency, and also you might have to consider the planning requirements of whether you need planning permission for this kind of pop-up service, because the bigger it gets, the more issues that will attract. And strictly speaking, the supplementary services, they've worked well when they've been smaller, because they don't come under the same level of scrutiny from the Environment Agency and the planning authorities. If they become more formal and bigger, then there will be more scrutiny, and it will be difficult to implement somewhere else. So initially, quite a few years ago, we did look at Stamford as a location for a HWRC. We couldn't find appropriate land in Stamford. Stamford is quite condensed. There isn't there isn't a lot of land available for this type of function, and therefore we ended up building a site at Bourne. So it often comes back to which land is available to locate one of these types of sites, and it needs to be ideal in terms of network availability with the highway, and also planning permission, and whether it's going to be acceptable for the Environment Agency. So it's something that we could look at, but ultimately we will come up with the same hurdles if we try to expand that, because it will come under more scrutiny. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Mike. My next speaker is Councillor Ian Carrington. Councillor Carrington.
Thanks very much, Chairman. I join colleagues in thanking Ms Batty for bringing the presentation. And I think she...
Councillor Carrington, can you speak into your microphone, please? Thank you.
I beg your pardon, I'll get this right after a few meetings, Chairman. My apologies. I just was saying that I think Ms Batty, in her very eloquent presentation, underlines something which applies to all matters of environmental consideration, or indeed climate change, which is that there are very, very difficult choices that we face. We all have, I think, shared aspirations. The question is, how do we actually realize them? How do we do the engineering? How do we apply the systems? That is where we face hard choices, and there are hard yards to walk. And I think the debate this morning has really underlined the importance of the Lincolnshire Waste Partnership. And there's a clue in the name there, partnership. My understanding is that the partnership has over recent years become very much more effective, and there were some of us who would like to see that relationship continue to deepen And I'm sure that the districts, I very much hope, certainly my own, I'm dual-hatted, would be keen to see that happen. Chairman, I would like just briefly to comment on fly tipping, because I had a conversation as a district councillor at North Kesteven with our head of environment only a few weeks ago about this. And I can share with colleagues that in North Kay, may be different in other parts of the county, we've had a very, very significant increase in fly tipping, perhaps to the order of 2/3 over the 18 months of the pandemic lockdown. But the interesting thing is that our officers do not feel that that was related to restrictions on the waste recycling centre, the biggest one for us obviously being the one in Lincoln. Their view is that there has emerged a subculture of so-called traders, white van man or different colours of van are available, largely working on social networks, social media networks, offering to collect and disposing of things in countryside locations. In our case, it's really spread out. It's not next to the big highways, it's in little lanes, and there's an awful lot of it. Now, we interrogate, if that's the right word, everything we find, any bag, any dump, we will go through and look for evidence. And I very much hope that the other districts will do that too, because that is key. There is a former person, so-called trader, who was doing that, whose van has now been recycled by court order and crushed to a cube, whose license was confiscated, who faced an extremely heavy fine, and if he doesn't pay it, heads to jail. That's the kind of thing that can be done, and we need to do more of that to enforce, because it is, as our officers have said, a criminal offence. So, Chairman, I think we do face hard choices, and we face those choices this morning in what we do. But I think my view on the hard choice is that I would, with some reluctance, consider it necessary to support the motion. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much indeed, Councillor Counter. I mean, you're right. As I mentioned earlier, we've used covert cameras and also increased our penalties, fines for those who are caught. I think there needs to be some sort of deterrent out there. In fact, using covert cameras, the offender doesn't really know where, if he's being filmed or not. My next speaker is Councillor Dyer.
Thank you very much, Chairman. And I must say, it's good to see you on good form today. So it's good to see that you've returned back to full health. And I'd just also like to echo members' comments on Miss Batty's contribution. I thought she was really eloquent and she put her point across really, really well. I wasn't intending to speak on this because I'm here in my capacity as Councillor Davies' deputy, but obviously with Councillor Davies' portfolio covering climate change, it sort of spans the whole authority. And having seen the news in the Lincolnite this morning that Councillor Baxter is now shadowing us, I thought I'd just respond to a couple of the points that he raised that, to be fair, most members have already covered. So my point will be quite brief. I also represent a large town that doesn't have a recycling centre, and that is North Highcombe. And at the moment, obviously, there's change in North Kesteven, as Councillor Carrington will know as Deputy Leader of North Kesteven, and we're going through a bit of a change where habits are being changed with the rollout of the paper recycling. North Kesteven District Council are tagging waste, inspecting bins and making sure that residents know what go in each bin. And I suppose we're at the start of a journey, aren't we, where we're trying to educate people what we can recycle. And I was emailing Councillor Mcnaughty earlier this week. I'm really excited actually to see what the stats are in North Kesteven and how this campaign is going to improve recycling within the district, although it has caused some frustration, but I think we'll get there in the end. So that's what it's all about, isn't it? It's about educating people when they put waste in their bins at home, what you can, what you can't put in those bins, because actually I think that's where we can see a big increase in our recycling rates across the county. And I look forward to the rollout in South Kesteven as well, which I'm sure that will be soon-ish, within the next few years, I hope. But I suppose with this waste at the moment, it going to landfill or it not being able to be recycled as well as it can be from a household waste recycling centre, I think that's the issue. As a local authority, we should be doing whatever we can to ensure our recycling rate is as good as it can. And it seems slightly odd that there's these two areas where perhaps our recycling isn't as good as it should be. So, you know, as difficult as it is, I think we're moving in the right direction. Although I can sympathise with the residents in Mablethorpe and Stamford, because of my residents in North Hycombe, we don't have a recycling waste facility, but unfortunately that's the case. My question is, though, I suppose to Mike, as a new member on the council, I know obviously councils across the country have their own household waste recycling centres, and I suppose it's the politics of local authorities, isn't it, where you can't use a recycling centre from another authority. Some authorities have number plate recognition, etc., etc. I'm just wondering, are there any opportunities to work across border in Stamford with other authorities to provide a closer recycling service for those residents, or is that not an option at all? Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor. Mike?
Thank you. Just to respond, at the moment, the sites that we operate are open to the public, and we don't do checks on where those residents reside. So we don't have that level of control that we had during the booking system. However, it's something that we are thinking longer term as to whether we do have a automatic number plate recognition to restrict it to Lincolnshire residents, because these services are provided by Lincolnshire Council taxpayers. So it may not sound realistic if you're on the edge of the county, as Stamford is and Gainsborough, for example, but are council taxpayers in those areas, are they happy to subsidise residents from outside of the county who may not have the same kind of provision? And it's something that did exist in the past, but it's something that we've pulled back from because it doesn't seem fair for Lincolnshire's residents to be paying for services to essentially prop up neighbouring authorities that don't have as good service. So that's the reason that we kind of withdrew from that. So that's, yeah, the response. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Steve. I've got one more speaker, then I'm going to allow Councillor Baxter just a quick final word. Councillor Linda Wootton next. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. I also pay tribute to young Rose. I think it's absolutely brilliant that she's come along here today with her passion. And I think she highlights something. Maybe we need to educate our children at school, to educate their parents how to recycle. I'm a keen recycler, as my husband's already disclosed. We have a whole wheelie bin full here this morning out for collection. I think as councils, the public don't differentiate between the collection, the waste and the waste disposal. And I think we should think as one council. We moved to Lincolnshire 17 years ago, and we had a box collection in Bedfordshire where all the items were segregated, like glass bottles, plastics and paper, which I thought was a great idea. And I passionately at home wash things up and I put them in it's a grey wheelie bin that we have. And then it all gets bunged in the back of a tipper lorry and it all gets mixed up and churned up. And I think, why on earth did I wash all those glasses and those boxes and make sure everything was nice, clean and tidy? So do the collectors actually sort of upset our levels? I really do think we need to have a rethink. At SKDC a few years ago, they produced this little wheel. And if you've got something that you need to throw away, you just spin round and it might say glass bottles, and it tells you exactly which coloured bin you put it into. And I found that very useful. And Councillor Baxter would be really shocked. I actually agreed with everything he said. And I think Councillor Parker's come up with a cracking idea. I think we need to work as one council and we really need to look into this. And perhaps young Rose, she will be our Greta Thunberg of Stamford, and perhaps she'll get on the case as well. Thank you very much, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Dida. You mentioned some good points there, Councillor Linda Wootton. Members, have many members been to their local recycling centres or to the Energy from Waste Centre in Lincoln? Because they're both fascinating places to go to see how they deal with our waste. If no members have been, I urge you to speak to Mike and see if we can arrange a tour, particularly of the energy from waste facility in Lincoln. The last speaker I've got now, if it's a quick one, Councillor Baxter.
Yes, thank you, Chair. We've all said how eloquent and helpful Rose was. I hope that will be reflected in the vote, that we'll have listened to her eloquent speech and vote in favour of keeping the service going. I quickly wanted to ask if outside this meeting we could talk, Mr. Reid, about the possibility of putting extra textile banks out on county council premises around the county. That's an easy way to generate income for the council and also to improve recycling for something that can't be put into the normal recycling collections. But finally, I just wanted to ask if we could take on board Councillor Cleaver's comment at the start that perhaps this isn't the right time to kill off the Mablethorpe and Skegness, Mablethorpe and Stamford collections once and for all. Perhaps the right decision is to say, let's do some more work about how we can make these events more useful, more productive, more recycling, and rather than make a firm decision to kill it off once and for all, that we say we will look for new ways to use those to recycle more. Is that possible as part of the vote?
We've got recommendation in front of us, so I'll read to you in a minute, Councillor Baxter. Before we go to the actions, may I thank you all for your comments this morning. I've captured 18 comments down there. I'm sure Kiera has captured similar. It's a very passionate subject. And again, I thank Rose for coming today. You spoke very well, and thank you very much indeed. Before I go to the actions, could I ask Councillor Daniel Mcnaughty to perhaps, when he does receive the petition, he does consider alternative actions before he makes his decision. Councillor Mcnaughty.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, definitely. And all the other comments as well. There's possibly something to bring forward to future committees as well.
Thank you very much indeed. Right. We've overrun by 20 minutes, but I'm fine with that because, as I said, it's a very important subject. And the first consideration is to consider the report presented to determine whether we support the recommendation to the Executive Councillor that he approves the supplementary waste collection service at Stamford and Mablethorpe be discontinued from the 28th of October 2021 as per page 29 of the report. Secondly, agree any additional comments to be passed on to the Executive Councillor. Therefore, I propose that this committee supports the proposed recommendation and agrees to pass on our comments to the Executive Councillor. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Fleetwood, thank you very much indeed. Therefore, we shall go to the vote. Can I ask those in favour raise their hand? Those against? 3. Those abstaining? That recommendation is passed. I'm going to move on now to the next item on the agenda. Thank you very much indeed.
Sorry, Chair. Could I ask my vote to be recorded, please?
We have to have 12 people to support that request, Councillor Baxter.
What? Just to?
Oh, right. That's fine. Thank you. Right, our next item on the agenda is county farms. This item is on page 31, 34 of the agenda pack and provides an update to members on the county farm estate. The report was presented by Sarah Wells, Business Manager Corporate Property, who is here in the council chamber. Welcome, Sarah. Can I also say that she will be talking about not only the farms, the employment, but also a very important subject which I'm sure Councillor Taylor will consider at Scrutiny B committee consideration, and that is of mental health, which I think is very important. Sarah, over to you.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, this is a
Can you
brief...
turn the drill off, please?
This is a brief information paper focusing on the Brexit trade agreement and the impact on the estate primarily. As a result of the trade agreement, a number of reports have been received from our tenants expressing problems in dealing with some of the new regime, mostly around the increased costs and the administration delays, particularly on those items that are exported that have a very short lifespan, and the difficulties that that is creating. I've given a couple of examples within the paper, which I won't go through now, but it is creating issues for people in terms of the quality of the goods that are being received. In terms of the labour issue on the farm estate, again, there is increased difficulty being experienced, particularly over the last year or so, in the intensive horticultural businesses, growing vegetables, potatoes, flowers, etc. In some cases, our tenants are reporting up to 25% cost increases year on year, which is quite significant. The labour is definitely an issue, people not even turning up on site, etc. So plans are very difficult. In terms of haulage, we've had no direct notifications of the issues on the estate.
Sorry, Sarah, could I ask you just to stop and we'll get somebody to have a look at this drill, because I can't hear, I'm sure other members can't hear either. I think we'll try and carry on now, Sarah. If it comes back again, we'll stop again. Thank you.
So just picking back up on the labour issue, yes, there is an issue on our sites, and as I say, the costs are going up 25% year on year with our tenants. Moving on to haulage and CO2, I'll pick these two together. Again, no direct notifications specifically. Haulage, we have just been advised that there just seems to be a slower delivery rather than anything else. CO2, there isn't an issue with CO2 at the moment. We don't have any particular large pig operators, so that isn't a problem at the moment. In terms of our continued support as landlord to the tenants, that is still going on. We're still encouraging very close contact with our tenants, who obviously in some cases are very rural and very disparate. We've very grateful of local and regional colleagues in terms of the LEP and business resilience programme that we've managed to link in with this year. So that's been a real bonus for us. Moving on just to the Agriculture Act and the lump sum exit scheme. The proposed scheme of government would allow farmers to exit their tenancy with a capitalised lump sum. We did carry out a survey with our tenants to establish the likely take-up and the impact that would have on the estate. Of the responses received, which were quite low to be fair, the take-up appeared to be quite low. The cap of £100,000 didn't seem to want to entice many people to take that offer, particularly those that didn't have accommodation to go to. So we aren't expecting at this moment in time a large uptake of that exit scheme. And just the final point on the paper is in respect of the strategy review that we're going to be undertaking, hopefully to complete by December 22. This will pick up items on wellbeing, the carbon agenda, which obviously the county farmers can play quite a large part in. We have already had 5 schemes approved for the treescape programme that the council was successful in, incorporating some 1,200 plants, hedgerow, etc. So the county farms will play a part in the county farms will play a part in the council's carbon agenda, and that's my points for today. If anybody wants to ask any questions.
Thank you very much indeed, Sarah. Before I go to members, I'd like to ask you a question, particularly your report on page 22, where you're talking about labour shortage, not particularly a problem nationally, but locally. Do you envisage there be a shortage in the next season, growing season? I know that Councillor Taylor will be looking at that in the scrutiny panel, but what's your views?
Yeah, I think it could be here for a while. To be fair, our tenants are quite resilient, and it may be that they work together at different holdings, families, actually pulling together as cooperatives, etc. But I think yes, at this time that there could be a problem for us.
And a further question: do you find that the labourers that do attend these locations, that they don't come not because of Brexit, but because of lack of accommodation?
Yes, I think the wellbeing side, the provisions on site, all play a big part in it. To be fair, so it's probably something that needs to be looked at holistically.
Right, thank you. I'm now going to open up to members of the committee to comment on this item. Councillor Spratt.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Chairman. 2 or 3 comments to make rather than questions. Councillor Bootroyd's area, of course, and I'm his deputy, but obviously I sit on this committee in my own right. But so I do want to make a few comments, if I may, on the narrative. First of all, on page 31 at the bottom, as far as the EU's concerned and the Brexit Agreement, I think most of us would conclude, or certainly from my political party, that in terms of trade with the EU, I can't help but concluding that the EU are interpreting the agreement in an inflexible manner. And I think this is causing a lot of red tape, as is demonstrated in Sarah's excellent report. And I would suspect a lot of the farming community, when they voted for Brexit, because I think the evidence is that most of them did in fact vote for a Brexit, probably thought that elements like that was what persuaded them, the red tape and the issues, and it seems to have got worse. So I think we do need a more flexible approach on that for farmers, and I would suspect you may even, without putting words into your mouth, Mr. Chairman, I would suspect you agree with me. On the top of page 32, the Northern Ireland Protocol, because we do have problems, clearly, of exporting within our own nation, the nation of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. And it's an absolute nonsense. But again, it's down, in my opinion, to the interpretation of the Northern Ireland Protocol. And I'm hoping that Lord Frost and some of the things that he's done will help rectify that matter. I know there's the issue with the European Court of Justice. I have views on that, as I'm sure we all do, but that's outside the remit of this committee. What I do find interesting, and again, an overzealous approach, the entirety of the EU, out of 100% of all the checks of goods going into the EU, 40% of all the checks of goods in and out of the EU, 40% of them are between the mainland Great Britain and Northern Ireland. And that can't be right. I sometimes wonder whether there's an element of spite involved here. A couple more points, if I may. On item number 6, the difficulties of sourcing labour. And of course, many years ago, I've not done it myself, but used to get loads of students on farms working, and I am a big Radio 4 listener, so it must be right, of course. And they had a programme on Sunday morning, and they had people on Sunday morning, and all 4 of them had worked on farms when they were young. And they were saying and concluding that graduates and undergraduates won't do it now, and this is a direct comment, because they want posh jobs. And it was interesting that it's quoted as £20 an hour here. They were talking in some parts of the country, it's £30 and £40 an hour. And one of the commentators said, well, actually, it's a lot cheaper if you do that. You can go to the gym, instead of going to the gym and getting fit, do this and get paid 30 or 40 quid an hour. I've got a particular view, which I probably shouldn't share with the committee, so I will. I think they ought to get some of the prisoners who are low-grade prisoners out of the prisons, get them in fields picking food during the summer, train them up, and when they get paid for it, put it in a trust account for when they come out of prison. But anyway, that's a different matter. So I do think that there are issues there on this. I know we talk about the mental health of farmers, and I know there's an issue on that later on. Now, I know you mentioned it a few moments ago, Chairman. Did you want me to mention a comment on that now, or shall we deal with it on the later agenda?
If it's quick, yes, thank you. Yes.
Sorry?
If it's quick, yes.
Yes, it is a quick one. Well, the agenda item later on, I can't remember the number 8, agenda item number 8, the Royal Sport. Can I thank you, Chairman, personally, for keeping that on the agenda? Because if you remember at the last, another scrutiny meeting, which of course Councillor Parker chaired very, very well, in fact, that came up, and I spoke at that meeting, and I was slapped down for bringing it up. And before, when I was on this committee previously, not by Councillor Parker, I hasten to add, but when I was on this committee previously, we did have some very powerful interventions from the farming community. And again, listening to Radio 4 at the weekend, listening to some of the farmers and some of the problems they've had, and particularly in the mental health issues and such like. And so I'm really grateful that you've kept this at the forefront of the agenda, Chair. I'm not a rural member, but I've listened and looked at the evidence myself, and I thought they've made very powerful cases, and I know this is on later, and it is all tied up with the agreement, and these are our people. And Lincolnshire is a massive agricultural economy. I don't need to tell people that. Thank you, Chairman. I shan't need to speak on the later item now.
No, thank you very much to the Councillor Sprague. Obviously, as Chairman, I can't comment on many of your views today. I have to be impartial. But what I will say is I welcome Councillor Taylor here. In his scrutiny committee, he is looking at mental health. And also, I'd ask Councillor Taylor, could you perhaps invite farmers to your committee to hear what they have to say, what their views are?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, just to briefly make a few comments on that. Yeah, very interesting subject here on the agenda here today. Very topical, based on it's being reviewed in detail in this committee and a committee B to scrutinise this. Yeah, and absolutely, I'll take on board your comment and other comments on this, because it's very important regarding the future of the economy in Lincolnshire. Interesting comment there from Councillor Spratt regarding seeing as younger people want to go for posh jobs. Well, maybe we need to look at that. Is that stigma attached to people working in manual labour? And we need to review that, and regarding mental health and conditions people live in, and also regarding apprenticeships for those sort of work and the skills involved there. So I look forward to establishing this committee and producing a report and producing that back to you with our recommendations, and hopefully seeing some improvements to our local environment based on this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Steve. Are there any further speakers? Councillor Baxter.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the report. I too, like Councillor Spratt, listen to the Archers and nothing wrong with the Archers, and it is informative, and it tops up our knowledge of the agricultural sector. I mean, we are where we are. I voted for Brexit half-heartedly, and I think lots of people who voted both ways did so half-heartedly, not quite knowing what was going to happen. I don't think we expected that 4 or 5 years later on we still wouldn't quite know how the whole thing was going to work, and that after 4 or 5 years of kind of 4 or 5 years notice, we wouldn't have the skills, the drivers, the pickers in line to do that. I completely understand about the student issue, and the thing with students is they tend to be in urban conurbations, whereas the crops tend to be out in the middle of nowhere, and the connections, the transport connections, don't tend to be useful for getting them there. So if you're getting paid, if you were provided with transport and you were paid for the time you're on the transport, that might be more appealing. I listened also to Councillor Spratt, what he said about prisoners. I think rather than sending people to prison, a lot of people now are given community payback sentences, which are far better in terms of keeping the rest of their life together, their families and their accommodation and so on. And I have, maybe to my shame, I have no idea whether fruit picking or crop picking, agricultural work is part of any kind of community payback project. Perhaps it should be. I wouldn't know where to ask the probation service, but certainly it's something we could think about. We're not going to provide the solution to international trade from this room, unfortunately. Perhaps if they left us in charge, we'd get on with it sooner, or perhaps not. But whether or not we end up having trade deals overseas or with EFTA or whatever, it's obvious that we're not going to be able to transport raspberries to Australia. So we need different ways. I wonder if anybody from the county council's relevant department has worked with our farmers, our county farms tenants and any other farmers on developing internal markets so that we consume more within the county and within the UK than we have done previously. It seems like part of the solution, an obvious part of the solution. Just finally, I know that there is at least one county farm site in Market Deeping, and I would encourage whoever is responsible to carry that on as a county farm, because we are absolutely, as a community, we are absolutely foursquare against the transfer of that land to housing. We don't want housing on Millfield, and we object to all proposals to put housing onto it. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Are there any further speakers? Councillor Greggs.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I agree with a lot of what Councillor Spratt said. However, I slightly disagree on the Labour front. I come from a large line of previous factory and land workers, and there's been, it's simple economics. There's been lots of wage depression in manual farm work over the last 20 years. Nowadays, a farm worker gets paid about what they did in 1990, which is pretty terrible, really. I mean, again, basic economics. If the supply outstrips demand, then prices are depressed, and at the minute we're in the opposite situation, and therefore prices are going up. Just quickly, because Councillor Spratt alluded to some places paying significant amounts of money. I know people that still work on the land and have done since they left school 20 odd years ago, who say that, for instance, TH Clements in Boston advertised being able to earn an obscene amount of money, and seasoned land workers have turned around and said, yeah, but you're never going to be able to sustain the rate that they expect, and it's dependent on too many factors. So we all have to be careful on headlines designed to exactly elicit people searching and going, oh, that might be a good idea, rather than taking them as gospel rates. I would like to point out, though, that things like this are drivers for change. Innovation happens when change needs to happen. Unfortunately, if we look to the county council of yesteryear, when budgets were significantly larger, we didn't pursue the changes that would have made it all of our lives significantly easier now, because there was no driver for change. And at the moment, that would appear that that's reversed, and therefore people need to look for new markets, be it internal markets, such as Councillor Baxter said, be it more automation, because automation is now becoming a more viable alternative, be it improving the working conditions and highlighting the fact that actually it is a skillful job to be able to do land work at a good quality and a decent pace, and now saying that actually that's a career, not just a job that suffers with very limited job security. So potentially reinvigorate the market and get people interested in doing the job. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much indeed. Any further speakers? No, I remember years ago, many years ago, when I was younger, I did gooseberry picking on a farm, and it was backbreaking hard work. So I really do admire those workers who do come and pick our fruit in this country. You talk about innovation. A couple of years ago, with this committee, I did visit a robotic factory near Holbeach, and it was fascinating. That's the future, robots. But unfortunately, they'll take people's jobs. Right, I'm going now move to the action. So the committee is invited to note the update and comment on the report, which you've done. The proposal is that I move we receive the report and request our comments as recorded to be taken into account. If you agree, can you please raise your hand? Thank you very much indeed. Thank you, that's carried. Next item on the agenda, and you'll be pleased to say we've recovered 10 minutes. So we're on to Greater Lincolnshire Path Plan for Growth. Justin.
Chairman, thank you. This is going to be a double act between myself and Ruth Carver, Chief Executive of the Local Enterprise Partnership, who I do hope is going to appear on the screen above you any minute now. Well, we waited long enough. Oh, she is there. Great. Hiya, Ruth.
Good morning, Ruth.
Good morning. So the plan for growth is absolutely critical, because it is the document which sets out the dialogue between government and each area, and in particular, of course, Greater Lincolnshire. It's a document which has been prepared by Ruth's team in partnership with others. She'll talk about that and about the content of the document. And I guess my role is simply at the end to reassure you and pose some questions around county council involvement. But just before I hand over to Ruth, I just want to quote something that Councillor Griggs just said back to you, because I think it was absolutely critical to this particular paper. He's thinking, oh, what did I say? Innovation happens when change needs to happen. And I felt as though that was absolutely the issue at hand for this particular document and this strategy. We can see that the economy generally is going through a huge period of change. We can either embrace the change, deliver innovation, and do things which are right for our economy, or we can follow the change and miss the opportunity. And I guess the debate I hope we have after this paper is very much one about whether you think that the plan is sufficiently far-reaching and transformational, but also whether it's sufficiently deliverable. So if I hand over to Ruth to take us through the paper, and then if there are any specific points relating to the county council's involvement, I will pick them up. If there are any specific points about the plan itself, then Ruth will take those. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Justin. Ruth, good morning again, and over to you.
Thank you. I'm just going to briefly talk about the plan. So it is a plan that has been developed with a number of partners, but most importantly, it was developed as a result of the actions that we all undertook through the Lincolnshire Resilience Forum and the Business Cell. So it is a plan for growth. It's relatively short term in terms of planning, so it takes us up to 5 years, and it is live. So we developed it over the summer, and we have taken action on some of the actions. There are 63 actions within the plan. We have taken some actions with partners to date, and then there's more to do over the next coming years. But it is live because we will update it maybe every 6 months or maybe more as the economy changes and we respond to some of the challenges and opportunities within the economy. So as I said, we've worked with all the local authorities, and in the paper we've listed who we've worked with, all the local authorities across Greater Lincolnshire, all of the business rep organisations and the education sector. Our role as a LEP is really to convene, so the actions within the plan are the actions collectively of our partners. Some fall to the LEP, but most fall to other partners. And ours is simply to be the holder of the plan, I suppose, the convener, and then we're utilising the LEP board as the place where we will review those actions quarterly and challenge, as well as other committees, etc., across Greater Lincolnshire. So there's 5 core themes detailed in the plan: business environment, ideas around innovation, which we've referred to in the previous discussion, people and getting them back into work and thinking about retraining, infrastructure and place. And then there's 6 sectors within the plan that we'll focus on. It doesn't mean that we won't do other sectors, but it does mean that these are the areas that were affected either by pandemic and need some recovery, or where we think there might be opportunities. And those sectors are agri-food, clean growth or energy, ports and logistics, the visitor economy, the defence sector, and health and care. So I'll pause there and hand back over to Justin, who is just going to take you through some of the actions that LCC are undertaking in line with the overarching plan. So I'll just go on mute and camera. Thanks, Justin.
Thanks, Ruth. So yeah, as Ruth says, 64 actions in the plan, and what we've detailed on pages 37 and 38 are a series of things that the County Council is already doing and is planning to do. And I guess if I could just sort of highlight 2 or 3 based on the discussion we've had today. We've focused very much, when looking on agri-food, on our involvement in creating the conditions for investment in food businesses. And I hope when we've gone through the scrutiny review of farming and county farms, that we might add some actions around the agricultural sector per se. Secondly, we've spoken a lot about people and about apprenticeships in particular. We're very clear that that is a significant priority. We are pulling together a number of proposals to bring to this committee about increasing the number of people in training and in employment in the county. One thing that worries me and that I think we need to do a bit of extra work on is what we do in the immediacy when somebody loses a job or somebody moves into a new job. So thinking about the issue of the supply of staff into the farming sector that you were speaking about in the previous item, one of the big problems is if somebody moves on, it takes a long time to replace them. And we know, don't we, crops in fields don't wait. So there is a real challenge in there. And then the very final thing I wanted to highlight was really when we look at the local transport plan and the range of actions that are featuring at the top of page 39, we see those very much in the context of economic growth and of economic recovery. So when we are making the case to government around those, we're doing so in that context. So I guess the two recommendations in the paper, Chairman. Number one is to invite you to debate and subsequently hopefully endorse the plan for growth that Ruth has presented. And then secondly, because of the breadth of activity and the points about scrutiny that have been made earlier today, we would invite you to ask us to put together an action plan so that you can see the progress we are making against each of the actions in the paper. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Justin. You're right, change, but change as long as it's good. We all don't queue up for telephone boxes anymore. We don't ride horse and carts anymore. We drive, but that's changing to other means of transport. So change, as long as it's changed for good. I'm sure Councillor Parker would agree with me on that. I'm going to open up now to questions. Councillor Spratt.
A couple of comments and a question, if I may. I'll keep them as brief as I can. On the background, the first paragraph in terms of how the council has responded, particularly during the pandemic. And this is an absolutely excellent report. And as far as I'm concerned, it actually demonstrates a very clear reason why we ought to have more devolution powers in terms of economic policy. Because I think the council has demonstrated, and I think the government has demonstrated, that this idea, and at the bottom of page 35, the idea of the partnership, it's not all down to the private sector, it's not all down to the government sector, it's a combination. You've got the government putting money in, if you give the money to the councils, and that will in itself stimulate the private sector, and ultimately you'll get more taxes coming in, etc., etc. So I think that's a really good, an excellent paper. There's one thing I just want to question without wishing to be petty. On page 36, the organisations involved in the development plan, Mr. Chairman, it talks about higher education colleges. And I don't know if I've missed it. I'm sorry, I did have to leave quickly, Chairman. Should that say further education colleges? Because of course, further education colleges are the main providers and sources of apprenticeships and such like. And I just wanted to clear out. I thought it was unusual that such a large sector in the Lincolnshire as a whole was missing, but I think it's a really excellent report, and I think looking at all the details in the appendix showing how the council is drawing together and is becoming an absolute excellent facilitator for economic development. And as I say, if we get some more government money, the council knows how to spend it. And I think the sooner the local government get these powers, instead of national government doing what they think is right, for localities, I think the better, Chairman. So very excellent report, and please accept my apologies when I had to nip out.
Thank you very much indeed. Justin, may I just comment to yourself and Ruth? It was a very comprehensive and, again, I like to say a very excellent report. I found it very interesting to read. Do we have any further speakers? Councillor Parker.
Yeah, it's got a lot going for it, definitely, no question. But I'm just interested in how it's going to be using a sort of not very grammatic word, operationalised, in the sense of breaking this report down into service sectors. They're already broken down to a limited extent. But if we take one of the things that's on virtually everybody's mind at the moment when it comes to high levels of spending and the need for reorganisation, and that's the relationship between adult social care and the health, National Health Service. And on page 38, what we've got is under health and care, delivery of adult care and public health in Lincolnshire, partnership with care homes, partnership to build business resilience and opportunities. Fine, and I'm just interested in operationalising this in that simple sense of saying, okay, what are we going to do, and is it going to be dealt with primarily by, of course, the that directorate reporting essentially developments through scrutiny, and I'm interested in how we're going to have, particularly under health and care, a relationship with the National Health Service. So, in a sense, that operationalising of what is, on the face of it, good coverage of a lot of important issues. But when we look, and I'm just going on health and care, but somebody who's got more interest could actually, in employment terms, go down to people and look at LCC skills, priorities, etc. So how are we going to engage with this from a putting it into practice?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Parker. Justin, would you like to answer that question? Thank you.
Yeah, if I cover health and care and then Ruth comes back to you on devolution and on oversight, and yes, it was further education colleges, so apologies for that. I personally think we've got some fabulous colleges in the county, and I always value working with them and the advice that we get.
I'm sorry, Justin, I'm having difficulty hearing what you're saying. I do apologise.
I've got a table which is slightly bigger than my laptop, so it's difficult to get the mic in the right place. In terms of health and care, the point that I think is really important in the paper is that adult social care and economic development are currently collaborating on an initiative to help care businesses to take advantage of all the business advice that we deliver. So as you'll know from our performance information, we support something in the order of 800 businesses a year. But what we did see from our performance information is very few of them were care businesses. And those are businesses who are going through major change at the moment. So what we have done is establish a scheme which will help care homes to be able to access some of the business advice, some of the business grants, some of the support on innovation, etc., that we provide to other businesses. Now, in terms of operationalising that for this committee, what the second recommendation in the paper talks about is producing an action plan, which sets out what are the things the county council is going to do, to put some performance indicators against them, and to create a regular reporting mechanism back. So that's how I'd look to do it, so that you will be able to say, are we doing enough? Is it delivering what we said we would do? Are there any problems arising from the delivery that we can learn from and pivot the activity about? So hopefully that reassures Councillor Parker on that item. And if I hand over to Ruth to talk about Councillor Spratt's comments about devolution and also the role of the LEP board in convening and overseeing the overall programme.
Thank you. Ruth, are you there?
I am, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, you're loud and clear.
Thank you, just checking. Just to take that extension of that point that Justin made about health and care. So obviously we are in the process of operationalising some of the issues. A good proportion of the actions are underway, and some of them, because it's a 5-year plan, are being developed. So the example of Justin talked about health and care, but an example that the LEP board is focusing on is we have a health and care enterprise board, which is about helping businesses understand what opportunities there might be available for working with the NHS and their outsourcing programmes, and potentially new ways of working and spin out companies, all kind of working in partnership and also working quite closely with the University of Lincoln's Medical School and its Centre for Rural Health, and identifying where innovation could be led by local businesses is a really good example. In terms of devolution and oversight, I think I agree with the comment that was made by the councillor, that there are some good examples of where we could go further in partnership if we had devolved powers. So, you know, working with the private sector, the local authorities, the council in particular, and the LEP board, you know, there almost is a bit of a route map here, and particularly as we update it and change it so that it responds to need. And then just lastly, the point about oversight. The proposal is that the LEP board is the convener and therefore has the oversight. As I said before, it doesn't have all the actions, but it does have the oversight and the challenge for the plan for growth, of which the LEP board are, you know, more than willing to take that on. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Steve Ruth. My next speaker is Councillor Mark Griggs, Vice Chairman.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Some interesting points have been raised by other members of the committee, so I won't rehash those. Two things that really stood out to me is apprenticeships and graduate retention. I know I'm in discussions with Michelle Sachs at Boston Borough Council at the minute and saying, you know, we're encouraging business to take on apprentices. Are we doing the same? So it'd be interesting to find out if, you know, LCC, are we recruiting many apprentices? Are we offering work placements for the new requirements for level 3 qualifications? Are we offering a graduate scheme? You know, is there any way potentially we could look at expanding that? We have, one of the benefits of Lincoln County Council is we work with so many different organisations. So surely we should be the, you know, one prodding and poking people saying, oh, yeah, this job's fantastic for you. It keeps people in Lincolnshire. The second point is about transport. So one of the issues that I noticed is, you know, if we look at the map on page 49, I was going, okay, Boston, where can we get to from Boston? So we can get to Skegness via train, or bus, so we can get to Spalding via bus, but not train. That's about it. We can't get to Lincoln directly. And I'm sure it's the same for many other, bearing in mind Boston's the second biggest population centre in Lincolnshire, and we can get to 2 other places. I'm sure it's the same for other parts of Lincolnshire where actually, you know, without the transport links, we're going to struggle to retain people. People will always move towards cities because it's where they've done the degree, and research shows that generally people are more likely to stay where they've done the degrees. But if we want any chance of attracting people to the area or getting our young people who may go off to university to come back, we need to show them that actually there is opportunity and they are able to get around and they don't need a car and driving on horrible country roads, and that there's some form of infrastructure to support them in their lives. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Steve. I mean, you make a very good point, because if I take the health service, ULHT, have great difficulty in retaining staff for Grantham, those rural areas. Yet, it's not Boston, Peterborough doesn't. You know, many nurses are attracted to Peterborough because the city, the size, and the facilities they have there. But good comments. Our next speaker is Councillor Bowles.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, a lot of what I was going to say has already been said by other members, so I won't go over that again and just support what others have already said. My one specific question was on the health and care issue again. On page 37, on point 6, we say build a cluster of local businesses to support active ageing. I'm just conscious that in my area, in Gainsborough, a lot of the organisations who support that at present are volunteer charity organisations. So it's just some reassurance that those type of groups who, you know, have the, you know, that expert skills and knowledge will be incorporated in this, and it won't just be businesses, it will be the volunteer and charity organisations as well.
Thank you very much indeed. I mean, Gainsborough, if you ever wanted to go and see a town that's grown and improved, it's a good town. So I'd recommend any members who haven't been to Gainsborough recently to go there. My next speaker is Councillor Baxter.
Thank you, Chair. It did tickle me reading about the drivers for revival, and I certainly hope that at the end of the process we'll all be singing from the same hymn sheet, because revival can mean different things to different people. Post-COVID revival, through this document, I think it's a curate's egg, and there are bits that I would mostly welcome, and I'd mostly welcome all of it. But the words used to describe the Thedlethorpe opportunity are subject to interpretation. I think to say that the import of I can't remember the right word for it. The import of radioactive waste to the county being seen as an opportunity for jobs and growth is stretching the point a little bit. It's not all good news, I don't think, to be considering that, and I doubt that it will happen within the 5-year period of this plan either. So I'm nervous about that. I'm interested in the choice of words around renewables as well. We seem to have specifically excluded parts of the renewable sector, including onshore wind, solar panels, and also ground source heat pumps, which along with water source heat pumps could be a great source of energy for the agri-food industry. And I wonder if the exclusion of those particular technologies is a point of dogma, that in Lincolnshire County Council we will not mention onshore wind or solar farms. I'm also concerned about the defence page. I think it would be a great idea to move any part of Whitehall to Lincolnshire, but building the defence industry in Lincolnshire, I think that there are, if we're going to take on people from the defence industry or take on former members of the armed forces, far better to engage them in the amazing technological improvements in the agri-food sector rather than the arms industry, if that's what it means. I might have read too much into the document, but certainly my daughter, I'm very proud of her, is working as an apprentice in the cutting edge of agricultural technology, and I think that the idea of going back to the religious aspect, turning swords into plowshares is a much better idea than turning swords into market shares. So with those reservations, that's why I will abstain on this report, but I recognise the amount of work that's gone into it, and I just wonder who owns it. Is it owned by the county or the LEP? Who has the authority to change it or improve it or adapt it? Does it have to come here every time, or is it an LEP thing?
I'll come to Justin for that. Before I do, though, it's a very interesting report on television this morning about ground source heat pumps. One of the commenters was saying they paid £11,000 for this particular heat pump, but it's not saved them a penny. It's the person who bought it paid £11,000 for a ground source heat pump, and it's not saved them a penny compared to gas. But yeah, it's all about saving money as well. It is.
With respect, Chair, the environmental agenda and if you shift to an electric car, it won't save you a penny probably in the 5 years or so because of the purchase cost. These are emerging technologies and they need development. And at this stage, that you might find with relatively cheap energy prices up until now that it hasn't paid back. But I wouldn't bet my house on it. But in 10 years' time, the guy who's fitted a ground source heat pump will be laughing at us who are still using gas and electricity.
But it's funny you should say that, because another commentator had a larger house as well, saved £100. So obviously, as technology improves in the future, it may be cheaper. I'm going to go back to Justin now to answer your comments. Justin.
Chairman, thank you. A number of comments on questions that have been raised. In terms of promoting apprenticeships at the County Council, Yes, we do. I believe we've got between 90 and 100 apprenticeships on the payroll at the moment, and we have a number of contracts in place with civil contractors who are taking apprenticeships on in their sites. So making quite a significant contribution there. In terms of the role of public sector, private sector and community sector that Councillor Bowles raised, absolutely the case. And one thing that I believe we'll see as a recurring issue in terms of the local enterprise partnership that operates in Greater Lincolnshire is a recognition that the private sector isn't always right, the public sector isn't always right, the community sector isn't always right, but collectively, normally they get to the right decision. So some reassurance around that. In terms of transport and mobility and accessing employment, I couldn't agree more. Vanessa and her team will be bringing the local transport plan to this committee next time, I think. Not long anyway. January, which includes some really important themes about transport and how we help people in our rural areas to access employment and how we help people to move from one town to another. In terms of Thedlethorpe, to me, the opportunity is a brownfield site that the government is seeking opportunities for investment on. There are more than one organisation who are interested in that site, and I think part of our challenge is to ensure that the community gets the most that it can out of the site should whatever proposal be acceptable to the community, and that's why we've chosen to join the working group. In terms of renewables, this is a Greater Lincolnshire plan. And if you look at the scale of offshore wind and the scale of carbon capture, etc., which is taking place in the northern half of the county and having a significant employment opportunity for people living in the Louth, Caister, Market Raisin type area, then that's critical in that context. And in terms of ownership, it's a collective ownership. The LEP have coordinated the piece of work. Ruth has taken staff off other activity to do so. It's being done under the aegis of the Resilience Forum, which is all the local authorities, the police, ambulance service, NHS, etc., etc. So I wouldn't see us bringing it back here for changes, but what we are looking for is for the County Council to endorse the document because we are such an important deliverer of services within that strategy. It feels right that we should do so. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. I've got two more speakers, and I'm going to move to the actions. Councillor Carrington.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Yeah, I was reflecting as the debate went on that many of the things that we at this council and our partners at district and city level want to do are to do with achieving social benefits for our residents. But you can't do any of that without a strong economy. A strong economy and prosperity for our residents are vital to be able to achieve what we want to achieve. And I commend this report for those broader reasons. But I would like to return to the action plan. I think I'm very glad that officers have mentioned that. I think it is absolutely essential that we link very tightly the aspirations set out in this report with a phased means of delivery and a means by which that delivery can be properly monitored. Economic development, sadly, is about more than fine documents and meetings such as this one. It's about bricks and mortar, concrete, steel. It's about actually doing things. We need to have a firm grip on exactly the progress which is being made. Chairman, my final point is one which actually Councillor Griggs has highlighted to us, and it's really the issue of peripherality. There are many people in this country who would consider the whole of Lincolnshire to be peripheral and don't quite know where it is. But within Greater Lincolnshire, which covers an enormous amount of real estate, there are places which are much more accessible, and there are places that are much less acceptable. And peripherality is a known constraint on growth. So I very much hope going forward we will look at, yes, physical means of tackling peripherality. And we've heard officers talk about some measures, for example, to do with transport, which may come to us in the early part of next year, but also look at non-physical means involving emerging or new technologies, or just providing basic broadband, as we're working very hard to do. We need to make sure that all parts of Greater Lincolnshire can benefit from this programme, and that means tackling the issue of peripherality head on. Thank you, Chairman.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Carrington. You made some very good points there. Justin, did you want to comment on any of those points?
Might be worth asking Ruth to comment, particularly around some of the way that she's trying to position Greater Lincolnshire in the eyes of Whitehall on these issues.
Thank you. My next speaker and last speaker is Councillor Dyer. Councillor Dyer. Oh, sorry, Ruth. That's I can't hear you properly, Justin. Sorry about that.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I think Justin's right in some of the wider actions that we referred to in terms of physical infrastructure and in terms of new technology, etc. What your LEP does, very strongly for you is kind of make sure that the voice of Greater Lincolnshire is heard very loudly, and specifically is, kind of campaigning and lobbying for additional funds that may address some of these challenges. In terms of the kind of new technology side of things, we are, working very closely with a number of partners to understand what it is in terms of new technologies that Greater Lincolnshire would have a real distinctiveness on. And we know that to be agri-food, robotics and logistics. We know that to be rural healthcare solutions to assist with peripherality. There are some also around energy. So it's being quite distinctive about what you are campaigning for and lobbying for to overcome some of that peripherality. But the narrative that we constantly use is a kind of polycentric narrative. So we're saying, we don't have a city, we don't have a dominant city, we have a city, but we have a network of small market towns and very sparse rural areas. And we're constantly questioning, how does that policy apply in our location? How would we apply that differently? And that's a bit large part of what the LEP does in partnership with the County Council.
Thank you very much indeed, Ruth. Yeah, apologies, committee. I can't hear sometimes up here. I don't know why these new microphones aren't as good as the old ones. Councillor Dyer.
Thank you very much, Chairman. What a positive report. And I think it's not just focusing in one area, it focuses across the whole of Lincolnshire, from Gainsborough all the way down to the south of the county. And it's wonderful to see this spread across the county. And I think that's something, since I became Collins Support Councillor, that I've been amazed at, how we can reach across this whole big area of Greater Lincolnshire. And we can support all the various communities. And this document, I think it's wonderful to read because it's so positive and it's putting it all in one place, not just us for members to look at, but for the public as well. And I do look forward to monitoring the performance on this. I think that's really important as a council, that as great as this document is, of course, we're going to have to monitor the performance. And I have every confidence, Chairman, that the performance is going to be as good and as positive of this report. So why any councillor would want to abstain on such a positive report, I do not know why. But I hope the committee overall votes in support of that. Just last week, I visited Gary Headland at Lincoln College, and some of the wonderful work that Lincoln College are doing in Gainsborough, Newark and Lincoln, and the various courses there, and it genuinely blew me away. We were there for 2 hours, and I think we could have been there all afternoon. And I know there's some exciting plans moving forward for Lincoln College as well. So that's really, really positive. Of course, within this report, I mean, being a councillor for South Lincoln, the hike and relief road is going to be critical for the Greater Lincoln economy, opening up the land south of Lincoln, but also halting the traffic issues that we have in North Hykeham and in areas around there. But also, it's not just about cars. Part of these roads, we have cycle networks as well, so people can cycle from Waddington all the way into the city centre. So it's wonderful to see that these new developments aren't just for motorists, they're for the people who want to use cars and walk, cycle and walk as well. I was going to cover Councillor Baxter's comments on Thedlethorpe, but I think, Justin, you answered, you said what I was going to say. In terms of onshore wind is nowhere near as effective as offshore wind. And the Lincolnshire coastline has got one of the largest wind farms, I don't want to say in the world, but I might be right, but certainly in the country. So, you know, there's a lot happening in Lincolnshire. In terms of solar PV, many members may have seen the emails coming in. There are various opportunities coming forward in the next few months. Of course, as a county council, we have got concerns there regarding the use of agricultural land and what happens there. Are our food miles going to increase if we lose agricultural land? But there's opportunities coming forward there for across Lincolnshire. And within this report as well, hidden away is Team Lincolnshire. And I spoke at the Team Lincolnshire event a couple of weeks ago, and I think we've all got name badges here on our desks. And I would encourage members, if you do know any businesses in your divisions, to look into Team Lincolnshire and get involved, because there's such a broad spectrum of businesses there, all working together for the good of Greater Lincolnshire. So that's something that I've been blown away with as well. And just one more point, Chairman, if I may. In terms of farming, since I was put in post a few months ago, I visited a greenhouse site in Nocton where a business, they're growing strawberries out of Nocton. They've just invested in Lincolnshire, and that's through the team at Team Lincolnshire. So they can grow strawberries all year round through greenhouses. And of course, there's the university using robotics in farming as well. So Lincolnshire is a really positive place to be with lots of stuff coming forward. So this report's wonderful to see. It's really positive, and I do hope the committee supports it. Thank you very much, Chairman.
Thank you very much indeed. Councillor Sprout, I understand you want to come back.
Just very briefly, I honestly never thought I would hear my closest political friend and confidant, Councillor Dyer, quoting from a little red book. Thank you, Chairman. No, I thought you was right to need it.
Thank you very much indeed. I'm going to refer you to the actions. The committee is invited to consider and debate the content of the Greater Lincolnshire Plan for Growth, which, again, I repeat, was an excellent report from both Justin and Ruth. The proposal that I moved, we endorse the report and request our comments as recorded be taken into account. Are we all agreed? And you are abstaining. Councillor Baxter, is that correct? I record to please Councillor Baxter's abstention. We move on to the next item, and we are now running a little bit late. So if I could ask you to make this brief, the Lincolnshire Rural Support Network. Is that you, Vanessa? Welcome.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm actually here simply to introduce to you a colleague from the Rural Support Network today. So hopefully Amy Thomas will be able to join us by Teams. But just very briefly, if I may, to remind committee that this is a subject that, as you heard earlier, has been close to committee's heart over the years, and we were able to support the Rural Support Network 2 years ago now with £40,000 to help them to employ a mental health worker within their team. So particularly relevant to your comments earlier. And linking to Sarah's paper really around farming and the agricultural sector as it goes through an enormous amount of change currently and in the years to come as the sector responds to Brexit and the end of the Common Agricultural Policy and the changes that will come to the basic payment scheme. So I'm hopeful that if Amy's with us, I'm looking to colleagues. Yes, there is a nod. Hopefully will appear. Thank you.
Good morning, Amy. Welcome to the committee.
Good morning, and thank you for inviting me to come along. I do have a presentation which I think Chiara is going to share for me. So I hope that you can all see that. So I think my job here is to introduce you to the work of LRSN and perhaps in some cases, perhaps reacquaint you with us. Can I have the next slide, please, Chiara? Thank you. So just in terms of a bit of a potted history, LRSN was established in 1999 as a resource for the county's rural communities and businesses. It was created as a partnership between churches and agencies in the county in response to the plight of the farming community and increased rates of suicide and mental health issues associated with an industry in crisis. It went on to be registered as a charity in 2002 and as a company limited by guarantee in 2010. We are now a well-established and medium-sized regional volunteer-led charity, and we provide help and support and advice to members of the Lincolnshire's farming and rural communities in times of crisis, stress and change. Volunteers are always at the heart of everything that we do, at the heart of our service, and demonstrate a community investing in itself and its own future. Our vision is to provide a lifeline to the agricultural and rural community in Lincolnshire, and we do that through providing a multifaceted, holistic and accessible service with the aim to improving the ability of Lincolnshire's agricultural and rural community to live well in the present and thrive and flourish in the future. In terms of how we do that, we're a listening service. We provide a listening ear in times of crisis, anxiety and stress. We are responsive and non-judgmental, and we are confidential. We treat everyone with fairness and with equality. We reach out, we offer multiple and varied pathways into our services, and we are always caring and compassionate. We always respect the dignity, uniqueness and intrinsic worth of every person we support. We constantly strive for excellence, we're always evolving and we're always developing and improving our service offer. Could I have the next slide, please? Thank you. This wordle throws up some of the words that perhaps are most associated with our service. We have over 20 years of experience of offering services and support in Lincolnshire. We're trusted and we are respected, and we're known within the community that we support, and that's really important to our success. The feedback we receive from our service users consistently indicates that the service we offer are valued and very much needed. As well as professional nursing and healthcare staff, we have access to a significant number of committed volunteers with knowledge and experience across a full range of issues affecting the mental health of people in rural communities, from stress to farm business planning and to family issues, relationships issues, domestic violence, all sorts of different things that people present with. Our trustees are also drawn from the communities that we support, and they give an additional insight into the needs of our service users and support us to make sure that we are delivering the right services at the right time. It's probably easiest to split our service offer into three. The first part being casework. Primarily, this is one-to-one work with individuals responding to referrals made by individuals themselves or by others. Those come in through a variety of means, by telephone, by email, at one of our drop-in advice points, and through other trusted professionals. Our casework volunteers have a range of experience, including physical and mental health, stress, legal, finance, business, tenancy, and a range of other issues. And they are more than ably led by our health and wellbeing lead, who Vanessa mentioned, who is a qualified mental health nurse. We have a helpline, which is again confidential. It's manned 7 days a week, every day of the year, 8 till 8 p.m. And we also provide emergency out of hours support. As well as providing signposting and advice to other agencies, the helpline's a point of contact and referral into our casework services and to other services we work in partnership with. And then the third block of service is our health screening. So we operate these at drop-in points at Louth Market and Spalding Auction, and through a virtual click, book and chat clinic offer. And these are overseen by our volunteer medical director, and they're delivered by registered nurses. They offer confidential health screening across a range of medical issues and are very popular at both market settings. Can I have the next slide, please? Thank you. This slide gives you an indication of some of the types of activities that we deliver, the type of support that we deliver, and the call on our services. The presenting issues that we support farmers and rural folk with really vary. They range from anxiety through to alcoholism, depression, self-harm, debt, financial and other farm business and personal issues. And you can see a range of those on the screen now. We do see a year-on-year increase in the numbers of families and individuals that we support. You'll see that in the year ending March this year, we supported 193 families, and that's actually a 21% increase on the previous financial year. We also took over 90 helpline calls. And then you will see to the left of the screen, these are the stats for the current financial year. And this is at the quarter ending at the end of September. And you'll see that already this financial year, we've supported 122 families through our casework and helpline. So I'm fully expecting that by March next year, that will have increased significantly from the 193 we supported last year. You'll see as well that we've already undertaken 83 health checks this year. Last financial year, we weren't able to do quite so many because we weren't able to be out in person at the markets. So it's really good to see that come back on board. You'll also see from the breakdowns on the screen that 60% of new cases coming to us at the moment are mental health related, whether that be through stress, through COVID-19, through the challenges facing our industry at the moment. It is really quite interesting to see that. We also work with Rose Regeneration and the social value engine because we recognise that it is quite difficult when you offer a confidential helpline and a confidential service to show the true value and impact of the work that we deliver. And our work with Rose Regeneration through social value shows us that for each pound invested in LRSN, we deliver the equivalent to £16.93 return on investment for casework and £7.23 return on investment for helpline. So you will see that the services that we offer present not only excellent value for money, but have a huge impact. Could I have the next slide, please? Thank you. I thought it really wouldn't be a presentation about what we do without touching on how we delivered during lockdown and the pandemics. We have been really quick and fortunate in our ability to respond and adapt quickly to working in a virtual environment, making sure that our services remained accessible and person-centred, giving us the opportunity to respond to need, but also to protect our people. We introduced the online health and wellbeing clinic, which is called Click Book Chat, during lockdown, and that enabled our nurses to offer support whilst our face-to-face offer at the markets wasn't able to run. We also were able to extend our helpline hours. Previously, they had been 8 AM till 6 PM. Recognising the increased need for our services, we were able to extend those to 8 o'clock in the evening, and that has been really well worth doing and is something that we have decided we will maintain. We also embrace technology in terms of being able to increase our profile. Last year's AGM went digital. This year's was last night and was face-to-face, and it was really nice to see people back in the room. We introduced blogs, we shared team videos, and we engaged our PR imaginations. I'm sure many of you will have seen the Mad May Marathon that's down there in the bottom corner of the screen, which was just one of the initiatives that we ran last year. And that was in recognition that fundraising during a pandemic and in a virtual environment is really difficult for all charities. We have been very fortunate that our supporters, both individuals and corporate partners, local authorities and all of our other funders and volunteers have continued to fundraise and support LRSN despite the challenges presented in terms of delivery during the pandemic. Could I have the next slide, please? In terms of looking for the future, my role is a new role. I joined LRSN almost 3 months ago now as head of charity, and it's my job to think about how we're going to look to the future. Our mission remains at the core of our organisation, and as we look to the future, we do plan to refresh our long-term plan and further our existing strategic goals. We want to extend our services both geographically and into new sectors. We recognise that Certain sectors, particularly horticulture, for instance, we're less well known. We're less well known perhaps in the south of the county as well, and we're keen to address that. But we also want to continue to provide the best possible service to our agriculture and rural communities, particularly as we know that they are facing uncertain and challenging futures. We're already developing new and exciting projects which will enable us to extend and enhance our support. And just to give you a flavour of some of those, we're currently working with the Prince's Countryside Fund to deliver the Farm for the Future project. This is a free project for farmers to join. We'll be offering some business workshops, some ELMS workshops, and providing some one-to-one business advice to really help people think about what opportunities the inevitable change is going to bring for them. We are introducing a mobile health screening unit, which will allow us to deliver outreach and health screening across the county at local shows, at ploughing matches, seed trials, farmers markets, farm sales. We hope to get out and about and really extend our reach. And then we are also in the process of developing a legacy campaign in order to further widen our already diverse funding base. We want to continue to collaborate with local and national partners. We want to work with you and to listen to our communities as we increase our understanding of the future challenges our industry faces. And we want to advocate on behalf of the farmers that we represent. Can I have the last slide, please? As I end, I wanted to bring you back to this statement from the very beginning of my presentation. It is really important that we reflect on how we support our agricultural and rural community to live and work well. And I think it's really important for me to reflect with you on why their issues are so important for Lincolnshire and why the services of LRSN provide a lifeline for so many. Lincolnshire produces approximately 1/8 of the UK's food. We are the largest UK producer of potatoes and the second largest producer of sugar beet. We also produce large amounts of barley, wheat, oilseed rape, fruit, vegetables, and over 38% of the bulbs grown in the UK come from Lincolnshire. We have high numbers of poultry, sheep, cattle and pigs. Approximately 579,000 hectares in the county are farmed, and the food chain in the county employs around 75,000 people. Farmers face long working hours. The average working week for a farmer is 65 hours a week. Isolation, loneliness, unpredictable weather, financial uncertainty, changes in legislation and statutory duties, loss or reduction of subsidies, administrative demands, and exposure to physical risks. And these all take their toll. And I wanted to leave you with some statistics which really made me think. Over 1/3 of the farming community suffer depression, with 36% having sufficiently low mental well-being to cause significant concern. Quite worryingly, one of the sectors that reported in January the greatest problem in terms of mental well-being and health were the pig sector and the poultry sector. This was in January, before the problems around CO2 and the collapse of that industry were being faced. And that is something that we all really need to think about. And whilst perhaps that isn't a concern for some of the county tenants, it absolutely is a concern for many of our farmers in Lincolnshire. Almost half of the farming community report experiencing anxiety. Working age farming people, unsurprisingly, suffer significantly lower levels of mental well-being and higher levels of anxiety. And unsurprisingly, there are also strong links between not taking a break or holiday or even leaving the farm for leisure purposes and poor levels of mental well-being. Quite shockingly, 49% don't take an annual holiday and 20% never take a holiday, with another 29% never leaving the farm for any leisure purposes. And you can see why that then takes a toll. Over half of the farming community experience pain and discomfort every day, and there are really strong links between physical health and mental well-being. Only 59% of the farming community feel confident that their business will be sustainable over the next 5 years, and this really gives us pause for thought as we think about how we might support our farming community through DEPRA's changes that are coming now. Agriculture is recognised as a sector with a higher incidence of work-related health problems than most, and the fatality rate due to accident and injury is 18 times that of any other industry. And finally, more than one farmer a week in the UK dies by suicide. And I think all of that really paints a picture that says there is a need for a service like LRSN. There is a need for all of us to think about how we can contribute to supporting our agricultural and rural community to live and work well. And I'm more than happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Amy. May I congratulate you and your team for all the hard work that you're doing. Mental health is a really important issue. Only this morning I read on Sky News that the cases of psychosis across the country have vastly increased. And Councillor Parker, if you remember last year, we debated about loneliness and isolation in our committee, how important it is that the pandemic moves forward to make sure these people don't suffer any longer. So I would support anything that your organisation or we could do to help them. So I'll now go over to questions. Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Very interesting presentation there, and I agree with the words you have just said. Very concerning comments at the end of that presentation, and that would surprise certain people. We expected to hear physical health issues regarding the farming community, but those figures regarding the mental health and anxiety are certainly a major concern, which we need to do some serious work about. So, as I spoke earlier about our scrutiny committee, we'll look into this and make some recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Councillor Sprout.
Thank you again, Chairman. Can I thank Amy very much for putting forward the presentation, and again, just to reiterate what I said earlier, thank you for keeping it to the fore, Chairman. And I passionately support this initiative, and I'll just say why. If you get a town or a city where, for example, a steelworks shuts or a car factory shuts, the government rush there, don't they, with a task force and deal with it. And there's counselling, there's job offers, there's retraining put in place. And yet you don't get that with the agricultural sector, not that I've seen it. And this is the reason we need this organisation so desperately. So the work that's being done, I fully support it. It's a great step. I hope the County Council will support it. And I know Councillor Baxter mentioned earlier on about listening to the Archers. I don't actually listen to the Archers, but there were two programmes on, as I said last week, on Radio 4, and one had some people from the farming community on, and they were talking about their experiences along the lines that Amy has just said. And so I think it's a really good. I also want to say, if I may, Chairman, what you said earlier on about asking Councillor Taylor or suggesting that he actually speaks to farmers as well, which he said he would do. And I think that's a step forward. A massive sector like agriculture in Lincolnshire, and there's no sort of government support, and we're relying on this. And thank goodness that the County Council is using its facilitating role and helping with this organisation to alleviate some of the problems. So I again fully thank and welcome the initiative, Chairman. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much indeed. For me, mental health is something that people don't want to speak about. They don't want to talk to their friends or their neighbours about. So I think anything we can do to help and support and publicise the helplines is best. Any further? Councillor Bowles.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. It's quite a personal one to me, this, and not something I very rarely talk about, so you might need to bear with me. The statistics at the end that Councillor Taylor referred to, unfortunately, my grandfather, who was a farmer in Market Raisin, is one of those statistics who committed suicide. So I would, for all the reasons that Councillor Spratt and everybody else has said, I would urge this council to carry on supporting, you know, the good work that's clearly been evidence that this organisation is doing, and do whatever we can to support them going forward. Because sitting and reading that, the question that I just ask is, what if that had been available then? You know, our family might not have gone through what they've been through. So yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, and very sad about your grandfather. Any further questions? No. Well, thanks, Amy and the team, for their work. It's a very important subject, close to my heart and my wife's heart, and I'm sure close to yours as well, Councillor Bells. We've got actions on here, and the committee is invited to: 1, consider and comment on a report and presentation. 2, consider future opportunities to support the sector. I'm sure we all agree with that. Agree to share comments with Scrutiny Panel B, Councillor Taylor, that will undertake a review of the support to agriculture sector in Lincolnshire. The proposal is I move that we note the detail highlighted in the report and presentations are noted and request our comments as recorded be taken into account and shared with Scrutiny Panel B. Are we all agreed? Just raise your hand if you do. Thank you. That's carried. We now move on to the last item on the agenda, which is the Scrutiny Panel Work Programme. Sorry, Scrutiny Work Programme. Kira, could you present the report, please?
Thank you very much, Chairman. This item enables the committee to consider and comment on the content of its own work programme during this year and through to the next year, and to ensure that scrutiny activity is always focused where it can be of greatest benefit. The actions required is for members of the committee to review the work programme and to highlight any additional scrutiny activity which could be included for consideration in the work programme. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dina. The only thing I've got to add on that we have been invited as a committee to hold a meeting at the Belton House in Grantham, which is a historic house, and also have a tour when we finish our meeting. So I hope all of you can make it when that is arranged. Also note on there that we are going to hold a meeting at Donna Nook as well. I've been there once, so it's very interesting, and I'm sure you will all agree, a nice place to visit. Are there any comments from members of the committee on the work programme? Are you all happy with the work programme? If that's it, I propose we note the report and approve the existing work programme. Are we all agreed? Please raise your hand. Thank you very much indeed. That brings us to the end of the meeting, which is only 20 to 1. So I congratulate you once again. May I thank Trina and Kira for all their hard work for the democratic services in preparing this meeting and making sure, and thank you members for finishing before time. Thank you very much indeed.